The first time I saw the house, it was raining. Not the gentle kind of rain that patters on rooftops and lulls you to sleep, but the kind that claws at the earth, tearing up the soil and flooding the streets. I was 27, broke, and running from a life I no longer recognized. My name is Clara Hensley, and I had just buried my mother. The funeral had been small, too small for a woman who had once filled every room with her laughter. Now, all that was left of her was a shoebox of letters and a deed to a house in the middle of nowhere, a place called Willow's End. The house stood at the edge of a forgotten town, surrounded by pines that leaned inward like conspirators. Its paint was peeling, the color of dried blood, and the windows were clouded with decades of grime. The realtor, a nervous man named Mr. Carver, handed me the keys with trembling fingers. "It's been empty for years," he said, avoiding my eyes. "The last owner, well, she didn't leave on good terms." I didn't ask questions. I was too tired, too hollowed out by grief to care about ghosts or gossip. Inside, the house smelled of damp wood and something sweeter, like rotting flowers. The furniture was covered in sheets, the floors creaked under my weight, and every room seemed to hold its breath. I chose the bedroom at the end of the hall, the one with a window overlooking the forest. That night, I unpacked the shoebox of letters and laid them on the nightstand. They were all addressed to my mother, from a woman named Eleanor Whitmore. I didn't know who she was, but the handwriting was elegant, desperate, and unmistakably loving. I fell asleep reading them, the rain hammering against the glass. I woke to the sound of crying. It was faint at first, like a child muffled by a pillow. I sat up, heart pounding, and listened. The sound was coming from downstairs. I told myself it was the wind, or the pipes, or my imagination, anything but what it sounded like. But the crying grew louder, more insistent, until it was a wail that scraped against my bones. I grabbed a flashlight and crept down the stairs, the beam shaking in my hand. The living room was empty. The sheets over the furniture glowed white in the dark, like shrouded bodies. The crying stopped as suddenly as it had started. I stood there, frozen, waiting for it to begin again. Instead, I heard a whisper. My name. Clara. It was soft, almost tender, but it wasn't my voice. It wasn't any voice I knew. I fled back upstairs, locked the bedroom door, and didn't sleep for the rest of the night. The next morning, I tried to laugh it off. Old houses make noises. Grief makes you hear things. I was grieving, wasn't I? My mother had been everything to me, my anchor, my compass, my reason for waking up every day. Her death had been sudden, a heart attack in the middle of the night. I found her cold in her bed, her face peaceful, as if she'd simply decided to leave. The letters from Eleanor were the only clue to a life she'd kept hidden from me. I needed answers, and this house, this crumbling relic, was the only place to find them. I spent the day cleaning. I tore down the sheets, scrubbed the floors, and opened every window to let the stench of decay escape. In the attic, I found a trunk filled with photographs. Most were of a woman with sharp cheekbones and eyes like winter lakes, Eleanor, I assumed. In some, she stood beside a little girl with my mother's smile. My mother. The realization hit me like a fist. Eleanor hadn't just been a friend. She'd been family. That night, the crying returned. This time, it was closer, just outside my bedroom door. I pressed my ear to the wood and heard it clearly, a child's voice, raw with sorrow. "Mama," it sobbed. "Mama, come back." My blood turned to ice. I didn't have children. My mother was dead. Who was crying for a mother in this house? I opened the door. The hallway was empty, but the air was wrong. It was too heavy, too cold, like stepping into a freezer. At the far end, near the stairs, a shadow moved. It was small, no taller than a child, and it flickered like a candle in a draft. I called out, my voice cracking. "Who's there?" The shadow paused, then vanished. The crying stopped. But the silence that followed was worse. It was the silence of something listening. I started reading the letters in earnest. They spanned decades, from the 1970s to the early 2000s. Eleanor wrote of love, of loss, of a daughter named Lydia, my mother, who had been taken from her. The details were sparse, but the pain was vivid. They said I wasn't fit, Eleanor wrote in one letter. They said I was sick. But Lydia was my heart, Clara. She was all I had. The letters grew darker over time, filled with pleas for forgiveness, for understanding. The last one was dated a week before my mother's death. I'm coming for you, Lydia, Eleanor wrote. The house remembers. It always remembers. I didn't sleep that night either. Instead, I searched the house for answers. In the basement, I found a locked door I hadn't noticed before. The key was missing, but the wood around the lock was splintered, as if someone had tried to break in, or out. I pried it open with a crowbar and descended into a room that shouldn't have existed. It was a child's bedroom, perfectly preserved. The walls were painted pink, the bed made up with a quilt stitched with tiny flowers. Toys lined the shelves, dolls with porcelain faces, a wooden rocking horse, a music box that played a lullaby when I wound it. On the dresser was a photograph of Eleanor holding a baby. The baby's face was scratched out, the glass cracked. My stomach churned. That's when I saw the writing on the wall. It was scratched into the plaster, deep and jagged, as if done with a fingernail. Over and over, in a child's uneven scrawl, Mama lied. Mama hurt me. Mama locked me away. I ran. The horrors began in earnest after that. The crying became a constant, a soundtrack to my unraveling. Shadows moved in my peripheral vision, always gone when I turned to look. Doors slammed shut on their own. The temperature plummeted at night, my breath fogging in the air even when the heater was on. And the whispers, God, the whispers. They followed me everywhere, a chorus of voices that weren't quite human. Clara, they said. Stay. The house remembers. I tried to leave. I packed my bags, called a cab, and stood on the porch with my keys in my hand. But the cab never came. The road was flooded, the driver said when I finally reached him. Worst storm in years, he told me. You're stuck till it clears. I hung up and looked at the house. It seemed to loom larger in the rain, its windows like eyes watching me. That night, I dreamed of Eleanor. She stood in the child's bedroom, her face gaunt, her eyes hollow. You can't leave, she said. Lydia tried. She paid the price. Behind her, the scratched-out baby in the photograph began to cry. The sound was unbearable, a scream that tore through my skull. I woke up on the floor, my nails bleeding from clawing at the wood. I stopped fighting the house. Maybe it was exhaustion, or maybe it was something else, something that had seeped into my bones, my blood, my soul. I started talking to the voices. What do you want? I asked. Why are you here? They didn't answer, not in words. But the crying stopped. The shadows grew bolder, brushing against my skin like cold fingers. I found new scratches on the walls, fresh ones, spelling my name. I went back to the basement. The child's bedroom was different now. The quilt was torn, the dolls' faces smashed. The music box played on its own, the lullaby warped and slow. And in the corner, where the rocking horse had been, was a pile of bones. Small bones. A child's. I screamed until my throat bled. The truth came in pieces, like a puzzle I didn't want to solve. My mother had grown up in this house, raised by Eleanor until she was 6. Then something happened, something terrible. The letters hinted at it, but the house showed me. In flashes, in dreams, in moments when the walls seemed to bleed. Eleanor had been sick, not in body but in mind. She'd loved Lydia too much, in a way that twisted into something monstrous. She'd locked her daughter in the basement, convinced the world was too cruel for her. Lydia had escaped, but not before Eleanor had done something unspeakable. The bones were proof. My mother had never told me. She'd buried the past, changed her name, and built a new life. But the house remembered. It always remembered. I tried to burn it down. I poured gasoline in the living room, struck a match, and watched the flames lick at the walls. For a moment, I thought I'd won. Then the fire died, snuffed out like a candle. The house laughed, a sound that wasn't sound at all, but a pressure in my skull. The shadows surged forward, wrapping around me, pulling me down. I felt Eleanor's hands on my throat, her voice in my ear. "You're one of us now, Clara. You're home." I don't know how long I've been here. Days, weeks, months. Time doesn't mean anything anymore. The house is alive, and I'm part of it. I see my mother sometimes, young and terrified, banging on the basement door. I see Eleanor, her face rotting, her eyes pleading. And I see the child, the one whose bones I found, whose cries I hear every night. She's me, in a way. We're all the same. Trapped. Remembered. The letters are gone now, burned or swallowed by the house. But I don't need them. I know the story. I live it. And sometimes, when the rain comes and the pines lean in, I hear a new voice calling my name. It's not Eleanor. It's not the child. It's someone else, someone who hasn't arrived yet. The house is waiting.